when I was thinking about what I was going to present on, I was thinking about a topic that would be both near to me and also something that would be interesting and engaging for you guys as well, and for the requirements of the assignment, of course. So today I'm going to be discussing engineering a better climate, or alternatively, how students can drive environmental change. Throughout the course of my research, I came across a research paper by Paul Enestes and Julie Zimmerman called the 12 Rules of How to Green Engineering. I'm not going to go over all 12 for time constraints, obviously. However, we're going to be covering a few, and I think it's just an interesting idea to talk about how not only we can talk about climate change, but how do we go about solving climate change issues. So the first one we're going to be discussing is inherited design. So inherited design is the idea that when you make a material, the design, you make it with green materials. Not just simply when you're designing something to be green, you're not just adding a filter onto it, you're actually making it out of something that is like a green in itself. Maybe you already have the materials, so you're reducing your pollution by reducing the amount of things you're using, whether it's using. So then this goes into the second thing we're going to be discussing, which is the design for separation. One of the biggest things with recycling is that things that don't break down over time, causing a lot of pollution. So when we're designing things, we want to be using materials like plastics or metals like aluminum that aren't going to break down over time. It's really important for when we're thinking about designing product projects. So when we talk about inherited design, so for example, this is a 3D model of a Magwell for an AR-15 assault rifle. As you can see, it's skeletonized because it's not just about making a project that's small or light or heavy duty. It's about making it green, and it's about making it all of these things. So what you as a individual or a designer could be thinking about is, how do I make this thing all of these aspects? How do I make it lighter? How do I make it greener? How do I make it more carbon efficient? This is an example of a humidity temperature that a student made. This is a optimization for an electric vehicle. These are all ideas that are improving what's already out there that you could be doing. So I was reading Gernot Wager's Climate Shock, and he was talking about how sustainability is, this is an older paper. I think there are laws now about dumping waste into the skies. But he was more so referring to the economic aspects of it, that companies aren't necessarily paid for it. He was arguing for a climate tax. And it's the same thing with companies. You have to ask the question, okay, why does my employer want me to design something that's more green, more energy efficient? Because it's cheaper, because it's like going to cause us issues down the line. There's a rule in engineering called the 10x rule of remediation, which is that it's cheaper to fix something in the design phase than it is to pay for fixing it later on when it actually causes a problem. So how can you, so the next thing is going to talk about prototyping scalable solution. So this is from the SBA government website. It's where they post grant opportunities for initiatives for things they want done. And this is literally one that just closed where they're trying to solve an agricultural issue. If you have ideas, there are people out there that will throw money at you. Just show your ideas. There's so much stuff out there. Lastly, the last thing in the 12 rules of green engineering is the talent one. So a Deloitte global Gen Z and millennial survey found that 60% of Gen Zers are looking for jobs in companies that are improving the environment. When you go to work at a company that is green or wants to improve the environment, you are, quote unquote, voting with your job, and that you are making a company that has better people because you are all good people for working a job. You're giving them better people because you want them to be green. This also goes into the more economy is that a seventh survey found that 4.5% and increasing of Gen Zers are experiencing what's called eco-anxiety, where they're increasingly become more and more aware and concerned with global warming as opposed to previous years. So these are just some ideas, some ways to think about global warming, think about climate change, think about your place in the process and the system of it. Thank you so much for listening, and here's my sources, if you have questions.